Aisha's hands trembled as she reached for the pen resting on the polished table. The room was quiet, save for the soft murmur of voices outside the heavy doors. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day her life would change forever. Her family's honor depended on this moment, but her heart felt like it was breaking. She glanced around the room. Familiar faces smiled politely, but none knew the storm raging inside her. She was about to marry a man she barely knew, Rohan, because it was expected, because it was her duty. But her mind was miles away, with Arjun, the one she had loved quietly, hopelessly, since childhood. She pressed the pen down, the signature flowing like a chain around her wrist, binding her to a future she never chose. She forced a smile, but the smile felt fake, a mask for the eyes that threatened to spill tears. The paper was cold, official, permanent. This was no longer just a promise. It was a sentence. Outside the grand hall, Arjun waited in silence. His heart pounded, but his face was calm. He watched as the woman he loved signed away her freedom. He wanted to call her name, to stop her, to tell her to run, but the words caught in his throat. He had no right anymore. The heavy weight of family expectations and social rules had tied them apart, and today was the final blow. Aisha's eyes flickered toward the doorway. For a fleeting second, she caught Arjun's gaze. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the years of friendship, the shared dreams, and the silent love were all spoken without words. Her heart ached painfully, knowing she could never return to that moment, to that life. The ceremony began, the officiant's voice filling the room with rituals and vows that felt hollow to her ears. She repeated words she barely understood, promising loyalty to a stranger. Rohan, sitting beside her, was calm, collected, but there was a flicker of nervousness behind his steady facade. He, too, was trapped in this dance of duty. The crowd applauded, and Aisha's smile stiffened. She caught a glimpse of her mother's eyes, filled with pride and relief, but Aisha felt only emptiness. She was married, but not to love. She was married to obligation. That night, alone in the room that was now hers, the silence was deafening. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating. She thought of Arjun, his gentle laughter, the way he used to make her feel safe. She wondered if he was thinking of her now, or if he had already begun to let go. The next morning, Rohan tried to bridge the gap between them. He spoke quietly, asking about her comfort, her needs. But Aisha's heart was locked away. How could she open up to a man who was a stranger? How could she forget the man she had loved all her life? Days turned into weeks, and the pretense became exhausting. Aisha played the part of the dutiful wife, attending to Rohan's family, smiling when expected, nodding to polite questions. But behind the mask, she was breaking. Each smile cost her more. Each polite word was a reminder of what she had lost. At night, she would sit by the window, staring out at the dark streets, hoping for a sign, a miracle. But life went on relentlessly. The weight of her choice pressed down, and the future felt like a path she was forced to walk blindfolded. Rohan watched her silently, sensing the distance, but unsure how to reach her. He wasn't the man she wanted, but he was the man she was bound to, and he wondered if there was any way to heal a heart that was already broken. And so the days passed, the story of a marriage made for duty, not love, quietly unfolding. Aisha's heart belonged elsewhere, but the chains of promise held her tight. The question was, how long could she keep living this lie? The wedding hall was still filled with guests, but to Aisha it felt empty, hollow, as if the air itself was suffocating her. The polished floors, the ornate decorations, the cheerful chatter, it all blurred into a background she couldn't focus on. Her smile was practiced, almost mechanical, but her eyes betrayed everything. They were heavy with unshed tears and unspoken fears. From the shadows near the back of a room, Arjun stood alone, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. He watched Aisha move through the motions of her new life, waving, greeting, exchanging pleasantries. But she wasn't truly there. He wanted to rush forward, to pull her aside, to tell her that none of this had to be real. But he remained frozen, a ghost in the crowd, powerless against the tide of tradition and duty. When their eyes met across the room, it was as if time stopped for a brief moment. Aisha's forced smile faltered. In that look, there was a silent conversation filled with regret, longing, and the pain of separation. Neither of them spoke, but their souls screamed 1,000 words they couldn't say aloud. The ceremony had ended, but the weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on Aisha's shoulders. She felt like a stranger in her own skin, a prisoner trapped behind walls built by others. Around her, guests offered congratulations, but the words sounded distant, like echoes in a dream she wanted to wake from. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Arjun stayed back, hidden in the shadows of the ornate pillars. He wanted to reach out to her, but the fear of rejection, of shattering what little dignity they both had left, held him back. Watching her smile fade as she stepped toward Rohan, a man she barely knew, tore at his heart in ways words could never capture. Aisha's mind raced. Every step she took toward Rohan felt like sinking deeper into quicksand. She remembered the promises made long ago under the old oak tree, where she and Arjun had shared their dreams. Those promises now felt like cruel jokes, mocking her as she accepted a fate she never chose. Rohan, for his part, was unaware of the storm raging inside Aisha. He smiled gently, hoping his calmness would bring her comfort. He offered his hand, a quiet gesture of partnership, but it was met with hesitation. He wondered if she saw him as anything more than a duty she had to fulfill. That night, the silence between them was deafening. They shared a room, but felt miles apart. Aisha lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart torn between what was expected of her and what she truly desired. The weight of tradition felt like a cage, closing in tighter with every passing moment. Arjun's face haunted her thoughts. She could almost hear his voice, soft and steady, promising a future filled with love and understanding. But that future seemed farther away than ever. She wondered if she had made a mistake, if following duty was worth losing the one person who made her feel alive. In the days that followed, Aisha found herself trapped in a delicate balance. She fulfilled her role as Rohan's wife, attending family gatherings and fulfilling social obligations, yet her heart remained distant, guarded fiercely against pain. Every smile she gave felt like a betrayal of her true feelings. Rohan noticed the distance. He was patient but persistent, attempting to connect in small ways, a shared meal, a quiet conversation. But Aisha remained closed off, walls built high around her heart. She respected him, even admired his kindness, but love was a language she couldn't speak with him. Arjun, meanwhile, wrestled with his own guilt and sorrow. He knew Aisha's choice was not truly hers, yet he also feared losing her forever. He watched from afar, hoping for a chance to make things right, but the world they lived in offered no easy answers. The tension between duty and desire simmered beneath every interaction. Aisha felt torn between the life she was forced into and the love she longed for. Every day was a quiet struggle, a battle she fought silently, hoping that someday, somehow, she would find peace. And so the days slipped by, each one heavy with unspoken words and unrealized dreams. The wedding that was meant to bind two lives had instead created a chasm, a space filled with longing and regret. The question lingered quietly in the air. How long could a heart live divided before it breaks completely? The first morning in Rohan's house was colder than Aisha expected. The sun streamed through the windows, but warmth felt like a distant memory. She stood by the window, watching the world outside move on as if nothing had changed. Inside, everything was different, strange, unfamiliar, and silent in a way that made her chest tighten. Rohan entered the room quietly, carrying a cup of tea. He placed it on the small table, beside her, without a word. His eyes searched hers, hoping to find some sign of the woman he married, but all he saw was distance. She nodded in thanks, but didn't speak. The silence between them was thick, like a wall neither dared to break. Days passed, and the routine of their new life settled like dust on forgotten furniture. Aisha moved through the motions of being a wife, greeting family members, attending small gatherings, fulfilling duties expected of her. Yet every step felt like walking on broken glass. Her heart ached for a different life, a life that felt impossibly far away. Rohan tried to bridge the gap. He noticed her reluctance, but misread it as shyness or fear. He was patient, waiting for her to open up, to trust him. He shared stories about his childhood, his dreams, hoping to find common ground. But Aisha listened quietly, guarded and withdrawn. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Rohan found Aisha in the garden, sitting alone beneath the ancient mango tree. The leaves whispered softly in the breeze, but her expression was distant, lost in memories no one else could see. He sat beside her, careful not to startle her. "Do you like the garden?" he asked gently. She looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. "It's peaceful," she replied softly. For a moment, they sat together in silence, two strangers sharing the same space but worlds apart. Rohan wanted to reach out to touch her hand, but he hesitated. The fear of rejection held him back. Aisha's thoughts drifted to Arjun, his laughter, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about their dreams. Those memories were both a comfort and a torment. She longed for the past, but knew she couldn't return. The life she had stepped into was real, and she had to find a way to live within it. At night, the house grew cold, and loneliness crept in. Aisha lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would ever feel at home here. Rohan's presence was a reminder of what she had lost, but also a fragile hope for something new. She didn't know if her heart could ever heal. Rohan, too, wrestled with his own feelings. He wasn't blind to the pain she carried, but he was unsure how to help. He had entered this marriage with hope and duty intertwined, but the silence between them was a barrier he struggled to cross. In the days that followed, small moments of connection began to flicker. Shared meals, brief conversations about the weather or family news. These were simple things, but for Aisha, they were reminders that life could move forward, even if slowly. Yet, beneath it all, the unspoken truth lingered. Aisha's heart still belonged to Arjun. Every smile she gave Rohan felt like a mask, and every quiet glance out the window was a yearning for a life she had left behind. Rohan sensed this, but chose patience over confrontation. He hoped that with time, trust and affection might grow. He didn't want to rush or force her feelings. Love, he believed, was something that could be nurtured, even from the smallest seed of kindness. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Aisha found herself sharing a story from her childhood with Rohan. It was a small step, a crack in the walls she had built around her heart. For a moment, they laughed softly together, and the weight on her chest lightened just a little. But the past was never far away. Every smile, every kind word from Rohan was shadowed by the memory of Arjun's quiet presence, waiting in the wings of her life. Aisha knew the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find peace in this new life. The house was still unfamiliar, the silence still heavy, but beneath it all, something fragile was beginning to grow, an uncertain promise that even the deepest wounds might heal with time. The rain came without warning that evening, tapping softly against the windows like an old memory trying to be heard. Aisha stood by the glass, watching droplets chase each other down the pane. The sky was gray, heavy, and filled with a sadness that felt familiar. In that quiet moment, the house behind her faded, and her thoughts drifted, uninvited, back to Arjun. She remembered the day he first held her hand. They were children, barely old enough to understand love, yet somehow they did. The kind of love that didn't need grand words or promises. It was in the way he waited for her after school, in the way he stood protectively when boys teased her in the village market, in the way his eyes searched for hers in a crowd without ever needing to speak. Now, those moments played like scenes from a forgotten film, soft and distant. They brought warmth, but also pain. Every memory felt like a small betrayal to the life she was now living. Yet, she couldn't help it. She had buried those feelings deep, but they rose like smoke in silence, curling around her thoughts. Behind her, Rohan entered the room quietly. He didn't speak. He simply placed a folded shawl on the edge of the sofa and walked away. Aisha didn't turn. She appreciated the gesture, but it only reminded her how gentle he was, and how undeserving she felt. Rohan was kind, thoughtful, but he wasn't Arjun, and that truth haunted her every single day. Later that night, as the rain continued, Aisha sat with her wedding album open in front of her. She flipped through the glossy pages slowly. Her face smiled back at her in every photo, but she remembered the truth behind those smiles. Each one had taken effort. Each one had been a mask. Her fingers paused over the photo where she was placing a garland around Rohan's neck. She remembered the moment clearly. Her eyes had searched the crowd for Arjun. Even then, he had been there, standing at the back, hiding his pain behind a forced calm. That image, his silent heartbreak, stuck with her more than anything. She closed the album gently, as if afraid to disturb the ghosts living within it. She sat still, the weight of the past pressing down. She wondered if Arjun had truly moved on. Was he still waiting? Or had he accepted the truth faster than she could? The next morning, she found herself holding a letter. It was old, folded neatly, and slightly faded. Arjun had written it to her before the wedding, but she hadn't been brave enough to read it then. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The words were simple, honest, and full of heartbreak. I know you're doing this for your family. I won't stop you. But know this, what we had was real. And if there's ever a day you need a place to breathe, a place to remember who you are, I'll be waiting. Not to pull you away, just to remind you that you were loved. Truly. Her chest tightened. She read the letter twice, then a third time, until the words were etched into her memory. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and slow. She folded the letter again and placed it in the drawer, hidden but not forgotten. That day, she spoke very little. Rohan noticed. At dinner, he asked gently, "Are you all right?" She nodded, but her eyes gave her away. Rohan didn't press. He simply said, "If you ever want to talk, I'll listen." It was kindness without demand. Aisha looked at him, unsure of what to feel. She wanted to be honest, but she feared the damage it might do. So she stayed quiet. But deep inside, something shifted. The weight of her secret was becoming too heavy to carry alone. As the night fell and the house grew silent once more, Aisha stared at the ceiling, her mind full of unanswered questions. How long could she keep living between two worlds? How long could she pretend that her heart hadn't already made its choice? The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a soft golden light over the garden. Aisha stood barefoot in the grass, her dupatta loosely draped over her shoulder, lost in thought. The letter from Arjun still lingered in her mind, every word echoing louder than it had the day before. She hadn't replied, hadn't even told anyone she'd read it, but something inside her had shifted. She felt the change like a quiet earthquake, subtle but impossible to ignore. Rohan watched her from the veranda. He noticed the way she stood still for long moments now, as if waiting for something only she could see. He had been patient for weeks, hoping time would bring them closer. But time, it seemed, was not enough. At breakfast, Aisha barely touched her food. She nodded politely at questions, smiled when spoken to, and quietly returned to her silence. Rohan finally spoke, setting down his cup gently. "You're not here," he said, without accusation. "You sit with me, but I feel like you're somewhere else." Aisha looked up, surprised by his honesty. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then she lowered her gaze and replied softly, "I don't know where I am." It was the first truth she had offered him since the wedding, and it hit harder than any argument ever could. Rohan didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and understanding. Later that day, he returned from work earlier than usual. In his hands, he carried a stack of books, novels, poetry, and an old photo album of his travels. He placed them on the living room table. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly, "but maybe these will help you feel less alone." Aisha didn't answer, but she sat with the books that evening, flipping through pages without reading. Her fingers paused on a photo of Rohan in a small hill station, standing beside a child who looked like him. There was something in his smile, a vulnerability she hadn't noticed before. She realized then that she knew almost nothing about the man she had married. That night, as they sat under the stars in the courtyard, Rohan spoke again. "I know this wasn't the life you dreamed of," he said, "and I know I'm not the man your heart chose." Aisha's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. He continued, his voice steady. "But I want to be someone you can trust, even if it's just as a friend." The word friend stayed with her long after he went to bed. For the first time, she wondered what it would mean to give this marriage a chance, not out of obligation, but from a place of choice. Could she ever open her heart to someone new? Or was it too late? That night, she couldn't sleep. Arjun's letter was still in her drawer, its presence like a whisper calling her back. But Rohan's words echoed too, wrapping around her like a second voice, softer, but growing louder. In the silence, Aisha realized she was standing at a threshold. One path led back to a love that once was deep, real, but unreachable. The other, uncertain and unfamiliar, stretched ahead with a man who had shown nothing but quiet patience and respect. Her heart was still tangled, her mind still clouded. But for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. Someone had seen her pain and hadn't turned away. And in that small truth, something fragile began to form, an uncertain beginning in a story she thought was already written. The days began to stretch longer, not in time, but in thought. Aisha found herself moving differently, more aware, more conflicted. Rohan's quiet gestures were no longer invisible. She noticed the way he waited for her before dinner, how he gently left the newspaper folded to her favorite page, how he asked about her day without expecting anything in return. These were small things, but they chipped away at her resistance. One afternoon, while organizing the bookshelf, she came across a journal tucked behind a row of novels. She opened it out of curiosity, only to realize it belonged to Rohan. The pages weren't private confessions, but lists, meals she liked, things she had mentioned once and forgotten, books she had touched but never picked up again. Each note was a quiet reminder that someone had been paying attention even when she hadn't. Her chest tightened as she closed the journal. No one had ever noticed her in such detail, not even Arjun. That evening, Rohan found her sitting on the steps outside, her eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't ask why she looked troubled. Instead, he sat beside her, close but not too close. "Did you ever love someone before me?" she asked suddenly. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Yes. A long time ago. But it ended before it began. She chose someone else." Aisha turned to look at him. "Did it hurt?" "It did," he said quietly. "But life moves forward. Some loves teach you strength. Others teach you letting go." His words hung in the air, stirring something inside her. That night, she dreamed of Arjun, not as the boy she had once loved, but as a memory standing at a crossroad, looking back at her with a kind smile. In the dream, she wanted to run to him, but her feet wouldn't move. Instead, she watched him fade into the distance, like mist in the morning light. She woke with tears in her eyes, unsure if they were from sorrow or acceptance. Over the next few days, Aisha and Rohan spoke more, not about love, but about life. They shared childhood stories, laughed over small things, and even disagreed without tension. It felt easy, not forced. For the first time, she felt a softness toward him, not as a husband, but as a person. Yet, guilt followed closely. Each time she smiled at Rohan, a voice inside whispered, "You're forgetting Arjun." Every time she laughed, it asked, "How can you be happy here?" She didn't have answers. Her heart was no longer clear. It was torn between loyalty to a past that had defined her and the possibility of something new that was slowly unfolding. One morning, she found herself writing a letter. Not to send, but to say what she had never said. She addressed it to Arjun. "I still think of you," she wrote. "But I'm beginning to breathe here. It's not love yet, but it's something. And I don't want to live with regret anymore. You were my first home, but maybe I have to learn to live in another." She folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where Arjun's letter still rested. 2 letters, 2 pieces of her heart. But this time, she felt lighter. Later that day, Rohan offered to take her to visit her parents. She agreed without hesitation. On the drive there, they spoke freely, and for once, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was comfortable. As the car moved along the winding roads, Aisha looked out the window, not searching for something she had lost, but quietly preparing for whatever came next. She didn't know what her heart would decide in the end, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. The visit to her parents' house felt different this time. Familiar walls, familiar voices. But Aisha was no longer the same woman who had left. Her mother greeted her with warmth, but behind the embrace was a quiet curiosity, as if trying to read between her daughter's expressions. Her father asked about Rohan, nodding approvingly when Aisha said he was kind. No one mentioned Arjun, but the silence around his name spoke louder than words. That night, Aisha stepped out into the garden where she and Arjun had spent countless evenings. The old wooden bench under the neem tree was still there, weathered, cracked, but standing. She sat down, her fingers brushing the rough surface, and her thoughts wandered to the last time she had sat there, with him, with hope, with belief that love would conquer everything. A soft breeze blew through the leaves, carrying a scent of jasmine and distant memories. She closed her eyes. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a strange calm. Not peace, not yet, but something close. The next day, she woke to unexpected news. Arjun had returned to the village. Her heart stopped for a moment. She hadn't seen him since the wedding. They hadn't spoken. Only one letter had passed between them. Now, Just streets away he was back. She didn't ask questions. She didn't tell her parents. But word travels fast in small towns. By evening, she knew he had come to visit his ailing uncle. Just a few days, people said. Maybe less. That night, unable to sleep, she wandered back to the garden. The sky was dark, scattered with stars. She stood beneath the neem tree, trying to steady her breath. Behind her, she heard footsteps. She turned slowly. It was him. Arjun stood a few feet away, older now, but unchanged in the way that mattered. His eyes searched hers with a quiet intensity. Neither of them spoke at first. Silence did what words couldn't. Finally, he said, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect you to come back," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I came for my uncle," he said. "Not for anything else." She nodded. The air between them was heavy with everything they had never said. "I read your letter," she said. He looked away for a moment. "I didn't know if I should send it." "I'm glad you did," she said. "It helped. More than you know." They stood quietly again. Then he asked, "Are you happy, Aisha?" She looked at him. Her answer wasn't simple. She thought of Rohan's quiet kindness, the way he listened, the way he never tried to own her heart but still gave his. She thought of her laughter returning slowly, like a forgotten song. "I'm not the same," she said slowly. "I'm learning. I don't know if I'm happy yet, but I'm trying." Arjun nodded. His eyes were sad, but there was no bitterness in them, only a quiet acceptance. "I loved you," he said. "Maybe I always will. But I won't ask you to come back. I just wanted you to know that if ever your heart calls, I'm still where I've always been." She felt tears sting her eyes, but she didn't cry. She stepped forward, gently placed her hand on his arm. "You gave me something I'll always carry," she said. "But I can't live in what could have been. I have to live in what is." They didn't hug. They didn't say goodbye. It wasn't needed. She walked back to the house slowly, feeling both lighter and heavier at once. Some stories don't end in togetherness. Some end in letting go. Inside, Rohan waited at the door, worry flickering in his eyes. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, something inside her softened. She didn't speak. She just reached for his hand. And this time, she didn't pull away. The days after Aisha's return felt different. The air in Rohan's house, once heavy with unspoken tension, now carried something softer, something closer to understanding. She moved through the space no longer as a stranger, but as someone quietly choosing to stay. Her steps felt steadier, her gaze clearer. And when she smiled now, it wasn't out of duty. It was beginning to come from somewhere real. Rohan noticed the change. He didn't question it, didn't press for explanations. He simply responded with his own gentle rhythm. He cooked her favorite dish one evening, without asking. He left a cup of tea at her table, just the way she liked it. No sugar, light cardamom. These were not grand gestures, but they were the kind that mattered. One evening, they sat on the balcony as twilight painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. Aisha looked over the rooftops in silence, lost in thought. "I saw him," she said, her voice calm, unshaken. Rohan looked at her, not surprised. "I figured you might," he said quietly. "It's a small place." She didn't look at him right away. "It wasn't what I thought it would be. I thought it would bring me clarity or chaos. But it didn't." "What did it bring?" he asked. "A sense of peace," she said. "I think I finally closed a door that had been half open for too long." Rohan nodded. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. That night, Aisha lay in bed staring at the ceiling, but for once, her mind wasn't racing. The letter from Arjun remained in her drawer, untouched. She thought of burning it, but maybe not yet. Not out of attachment, but as a quiet respect for the love that once was. In the morning, She surprised Rohan by asking if they could visit the hill station he'd once shown her in a photo. The same one from his old journal. His eyes lit up, not because she finally wanted to go, but because she remembered. The trip wasn't luxurious. It was quiet, simple. Long drives, shared silences, small talks over roadside tea stalls. But in those days, something began to grow, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of choice. On the final evening of the trip, they stood together on a hilltop, watching the sun set behind the trees. The wind was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and dust. Aisha turned to Rohan, her scarf fluttering slightly. "I don't know what love is supposed to feel like anymore," she admitted. "But when I'm with you, I feel safe. And I think that matters more than I realized." Rohan looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he smiled. "Love doesn't always come like thunder," he said. "Sometimes it grows quietly, like roots beneath the soil. You don't see it at first. But one day, you look around and realize you're no longer standing alone." She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just took his hand and held it, not with hesitation, but with something close to trust. They drove back the next morning, the roads winding and familiar. And when they returned home, the house didn't feel quite as silent. It felt lived in. It felt like something new was beginning. Aisha didn't forget Arjun. She never would. But he had become a part of her story, not the ending, but a chapter that had taught her what her heart was capable of. Now, she was ready to write the next one. With Rohan. Slowly. Gently. Willingly. And sometimes that's all love really needs.